Good day, everyone. So we are the Group 4 and we are going to report about the Salamanca Statement and Framework for Action on Special Needs Education. So before all that, I am Natalie Kate Galliner and I will talk about the preface of this document written by Federico Mayor. So Federico Mayor Zaragoza, born on 27 January 1934 in Barcelona, is a Spanish scientist, scholar, politician, diplomat, and poet. He served as a Director General of UNESCO from 1987 to 1999. He is currently the chairman of the Foundation for a Culture of Peace and a member of the Honorary Board of the International Decade for the Promotion of a Culture of Peace and Nonviolence for the Children of the World. So his preface. So 300 participants and more representing 92 governments, so 25 international organizations gathering in Salamanca, Spain on June 7 to 10, 1994. So the objective of the conference is to further discuss the education for all and to consider the fundamental policy shifts to promote the approach of inclusive education and to namely enable schools to serve all children, particularly those with special educational needs. So, special need education is an issue regarding on equal concern to countries of the North and the South. This issue needs to be resolved by giving equal treatment and to avoid isolation as the only solution to this problem. So, this event was organized by the government of Spain in cooperation with UNESCO or the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. This brought together senior education officials, administrators, policymakers, and specialists, as well as the representatives of the United Nations and the specialized agencies, other international governmental organizations, non-governmental organizations, and donor agencies. So, adopting the Salamanca Statement on Principles, Policy, and Practice in Special Needs Education and a Framework for Action. These documents are informed by the principle of inclusion, by recognition of the need to work towards schools for all. Institutions that include everybody to celebrate differences, support learning, and respond to individual needs. As such, they include an important contribution to the agenda for achieving education for all and for making schools educationally more effective. So in this document, it will raise the equality and awareness and help the readers to enact of the Salamanca Conference within their respective fields of responsibility.
Good day everyone, I'm Angelica, the second reporter of this group. The Salamanca Statement on Principles, Policy and Practice in Special Needs Education, reaffirming the right to education of every individual as enshrined in 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights and renewing the pledge made by the world community at the 1990 World Conference on Education for All to ensure that right for all regardless of individual differences. Recalling the several United Nations declarations culminating in the 1993 United Nations Standards Rules on Equalization of Opportunities for Persons with Disabilities, which urge states to ensure that the education of persons with disabilities is an integral part of the education system. The delegate of the World Conference on Special Needs Education, representing that 92 government and 25 international organizations, assembled here in Salamanca, Spain from 7 to 10 of month of June 1994, hereby reaffirm our commitment to education for all, recognizing the necessity and urge of providing education for children, youth and adults with special educational needs within the regular education system, and further hereby endorsed the framework for action in special needs education, that governments and organizations may be guided by the spirit of its provision and recommendation. Every child has fundamental right to education and must be given the opportunity to achieve and maintain an acceptable level of learning. Every child has unique characteristics, interests, abilities, and learning needs. Each child is unique and learns differently. As a teacher, I believe that it is important to teach in a way that employs a variety of teaching strategies. The students should learn from each other and learn to work together through cooperative learning. Regular schools with the inclusive orientation. It is the most effective means of combating discriminatory attitudes, creating welcoming communities, building an inclusive society, and achieving education for all. Moreover, they provide an effective education to the majority of children and provide the efficiency and ultimately the cost effectiveness of the entire education system. Education system should be designed and educational programs implemented to take into account the wide diversity of these characteristics and needs. We can call upon all governments and urge them to give the highest policy and budgetary priority. Call to government give the highest policy and budgetary priority to improve education services so that all children should be included, regardless of differences or difficulties. Put greater effort into preschool strategies as well as vocational aspects of inclusive education. Adopt as a matter of law or policy the principle of inclusive education, enrolling all children in regular schools unless there are compelling reasons for doing otherwise. Develop demonstration for projects and encourage exchanges with countries having experience with inclusive schools. Establish decentralized and participatory mechanisms for planning, monitoring, and evaluating educational provision for children and adults with special education needs. We also call upon the international community. In the particular, we call upon governments with international cooperation programs and international funding agencies, especially the sponsors of the World Conference on Education for All, the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization or UNESCO, the United Nations Children's Fund or UNICEF, United Nations Development Program or UNDP, and the World Bank, to endorse the approach of inclusive schooling and to support the development of special needs education as an integral part of all the education programs. In education, finding ways to meet the learning needs of students with disabilities can means receiving specialized support or special education. The United Nations and its specialized agencies, in particular the International Labour Office or ILO, the World Health Organization or WHO, UNESCO, and UNICEF, to strengthen their inputs for technical cooperation including that related to technology transfer and know-how, encompasses the whole range of activities to develop or strengthen individual, to strengthen their collaboration with official national bodies. UNESCO as the United Nations Agency for Education, to ensure that special needs education forms part of every discussion dealing with education for all various forums, to mobilize the support of organization of the teaching profession, in matters related to enhancing teacher education as regards provision for special educational needs, to stimulate the academic community to strengthen research and networking, and to establish regional centers of information and documentation, to mobilize funds through the creation with its next medium-term plan of 1996 to 2002. Framework for Action in Special Needs Education. The purpose is to inform policy and guide actions by governments, international organizations, national aid agencies, non-governmental organizations, and other bodies in implementing the Salamanca Statement on Principles, Policy, and Practice in Special Needs Education. The framework draws extensively upon the national experience of the participating countries as well as upon resolutions, recommendations, and publications of the United Nations system and other intergovernmental organizations, especially the standard rules on the equalization of opportunities for persons with disabilities. It also takes account of the proposal, guidelines, and recommendations arising from the 5 regional seminars held to prepare the World Conference. The right of every child to an education is proclaimed in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and was forcefully reaffirmed by the World Declaration on Education for All, United Nations Standard Rules, and the Equalization of Opportunities for Persons with Disabilities. Every person with disabilities has a right to express their wishes with regard to their education. As far as this can be ascertained, parents have inherent right to be consulted on the form of education best suited to the needs, circumstances, and aspirations of their children. The guiding principle that informs this framework is that schools should accommodate all children regardless of their physical, intellectual, social, emotional, linguistic, or other conditions. This should include disabled and gifted children, straight and working children, children from remote or nomadic population, children from linguistic, ethnic, or cultural minorities, and children from other disadvantaged or marginalized areas or groups. This condition create a range of different challenges to school systems. In the context of this framework, the term special educational needs refers to all these children and youth whose needs arise from disabilities or learning difficulties. Many children experience learning difficulties and thus have special educational needs at some time during their schooling. Schools have to find ways of successfully educating all children, including those who have serious disadvantages and disabilities. Special needs education incorporates the proven principles of sound pedagogy from which all children may benefit. It assumes that human differences are normal and that learning must accordingly be adapted to the needs of the children rather than the child fitted to preordained assumptions regarding the pace and nature of the learning process. A child-centered pedagogy is beneficial to all students and, as a consequence, to society as a whole. Experience has demonstrated that it can be substantially reduce the dropout and repetition that are so much part of many education systems while ensuring higher average levels of achievement. This framework for action comprises the following sections. 1. New thinking in special needs education. 2. Guidelines for action at the national level. A. Policy and organization. B. School factors. C. Recruitment and training of educational personnel. D. External support services. E. Priority areas. F. Community perspective. G. Resource requirements. And 3. Guidelines for actions at the regional and international level.
New thinking in special need education. This trend in social policy during the past 2 decades has been to promote integration and participation and to combat exclusion. Inclusion and participation are essential to human dignity and to the enjoyment and exercise of human rights. Within the field of education, this is reflected in the development of strategies that seek to bring about genuine equalization of opportunity. So experience in many countries demonstrate that the integration of children and youth with special education needs is best achieved within inclusive schools that serve all children within a community. So within this context, that those with special educational can achieve the fullest educational progress and social integration. So while inclusive schools provide a favorable setting for achieving equal opportunity and full participation, their success requires a concerted effort not only by teachers and school staff, but also by peers, parents, families, and volunteers. So the reform of social institution is not only a technical fact, it depends. So sa kuan above all upon the conviction, commitment, and goodwill of individuals who constitute society. So, so the funda- so the fundamental principle of inclusive school is that all children should learn together, wherever possible, regardless of any difficulties or differences they may have. So inclusive school must recognize the response to the diverse needs of their children, and then accommodating both different styles and rates of learning and ensuring quality education to all through appropriate curricular, organizational arrangements, teaching strategies, resource use, and partnership with their communities. There should be a continuum of support and services to match the continuum of special needs encountered in every school. So within inclusive school, children with special educational needs should receive whatever extra support they may require to ensure their effective educational. So inclusive schooling is the most effective means for building solidarity between children with special needs and their peers. And the situation regarding special need education varies enormously from one country to another. There are, for example, countries that have well-established systems of special school for those with specific impairments. Special school can represent a valuable resource for the development of inclusive school. So the staff of this special institution possess the expertise needed for early screening and identification of children with disabilities. Then special school can also serve as training and resource centers for staff in regular school. And then special school or units within inclusive school may continue to provide the most suitable education for the relatively small number of children with disabilities who cannot be adequately served in regular classroom or school. So, and investment in existing special schools should be agreed to the new and expanded rule of providing professional support to regular school and meeting special educational needs. An important contribution to ordinary school, which the staff of special school can make to the matching of curricular content and methods to the individual needs of pupil. Then, countries that have few or no special school would in general be well advised to concentrate their efforts on the development of inclusive school and to specialized service needed to enable them to serve the vast majority of children and youth, especially provision of teacher training in special needs education and to establishment of suitable staff and equipped resource center to which schools could turn for support. Experience, especially in developing countries, indicate that the high cost of special schools means in practice that only a small minority of students, usually and urban alike, benefit from them. And then educational planning by government should concentrate on education for all persons in all regions of a country and in all economic conditions through both public and private schools. So, this framework is intended as an overall guide to planning action in special needs education. It evidently cannot take account of the vast variety of situations encountered in the different regions and countries of the world and must accordingly be adapted to fit local requirements and circumstances to be effective. It must be complemented by national, regional, and local plans of action inspired by political and popular with to achieve educational for all. Because in the past, relatively few children with disability have had access to education, especially in the developing regions of the world. There are millions of adults with disabilities who lack even the rudiments of a basic education. A concentrated effort is those required to teach literacy, numeracy, and basic skills to persons with disabilities through adult education programmers. And it is particularly important to recognize that women have often been doubly disadvantaged, bias based on gender, compounding the difficulties caused by their disability. So dapat ang women and men should equal influence on the design of educational programmers and the same opportunities to benefit from them. So next, guidelines for action at the national level. Integrated educational and community-based rehabilitation represent complementary and mutually supported approaches to serving those with special needs. Both are based upon the principle of inclusion, integration, and participation, and recent well-tested and cost-effective approaches to promoting equality of access for those with special educational needs are as part of a nationwide strategy aimed at achieving educational for all. Countries are invited to consider the following action concerning the policy and organization of their educational system. And then, legislation should recognize the principle of equality of opportunity to children, youth, and adults with disability in primary, secondary, and tertiary education carried out in so far as possible and integrated setting. So, like what I said kanina. And then, parallel and complementary legislative measures should be adopted in the fields of health, social welfare, vocational training, and employment in order to support and give full effect to educational legislation. Then, educational policies at all levels, from the national to the local, should stipulate that a child with a disability should attend the neighborhood school that is the school that would be attended and the child did not have a disability. Exemption to this rule should be considered on a case-by-case basis where only education in a special school or establishment can be shown to meet the needs of the individual child. The practice of mainstreaming children with disability should be an integral part of national plans for achieving education for all. Regular school should be encouraged. Necessary provision should also be made for ensuring inclusion of youth and adults with special needs in secondary and higher education as well as in training programmers. Special attention should be given to ensuring equality of access and opportunity for girls and men with disabilities. Then special attention should be paid to the needs of children and youth with severe or multiple disability. They have the same rights as others in the community to the achievement of maximum independence as adults and should be educated to the best of their potential towards that end. Educational policy should take full account of individual differences and situation. The importance of sign language as the medium of communication among the deaf. For example, should be recognized and prevention made to ensure that all deaf persons have access to education in their national sign language. Owing to the particular communication need of deaf or blind persons, their education may be more suitable provided in special school or special classes and units in mainstream schools. Community-based rehabilitation should be seen as a specific approach within community development aimed at rehabilitation, equalization of opportunities, and social integration of all people with disabilities. It should be implemented through the combined efforts of people with disability themselves, their families and communities, and the appropriate education, health, vocational, and welfare services. Ang community should be developed as a part of global strategy for supporting cost-effective education and training for people with educational needs. So, coordination between educational authorities and those responsible for health, employment, and social services should be strengthened at all levels to bring about convergence and complementarity. Planning and coordination should also take account of the actual and potential role that semi-public agencies and governmental organizations can play. So both policies and financing arrangements should encourage and facilitate the development of inclusive schools. Then, national authorities have a responsibility to monitor external funding to special needs education and working in cooperation with their international partners to ensure that it corresponds to national priorities and policies aimed at achieving education for all. So a particular effort needs to be made to elicit community support in meeting special educational needs. And that's